Listen, Hebrews. Now this is about the Botham Jean story and the Amber Geiger, the lady that supposedly mistaken his house in Dallas, and she said that she went into the wrong apartment, and at first she said the door was ajar, but the lawyer said that the doors automatic slam when you came outside of them, so there's no way it could have been, when you open the door, it closed on its own like a screen door slam, so there's no way the door could have been ajar. And then she came, and then they said now they trying to check apartment and all of that, but they started trying to put the brother name down, and he already in the ground. So we know how they work, but they started killing us, and there ain't nothing really we can do about it. But his lawyer is gonna talk, and y'all check this out and leave a comment what you think about it.
A search warrant describes more of the evidence collected at Botham Jean's apartment the day after he was shot and killed by an off-duty Dallas police officer. Hello, I'm Heather Hayes.
I'm Steve Vigor. It's 9 o'clock. Among the items listed in the document are cartridge casings, a backpack with police equipment, and marijuana.
Welcome back to AM Joy. That report from a local Fox affiliate in Dallas, Texas sparked outrage this week and allegations that the media and the police are trying to smear Botham Jean, the 26-year-old black man who was gunned down in his own apartment by an off-duty police officer.
Excuse me.
The Fox affiliate tweeted about the search warrant on the same day as his funeral. Last week, Jean, a 2016 college graduate who worked at PricewaterhouseCoopers and was a song leader at his local church, was shot and killed in his home by Dallas police officer Amber Geiger. According to the Dallas Morning News, Geiger told police that she mistook Jean's apartment for her own and that the door was ajar. Geiger says that when she entered, she saw a silhouette and thought she was being burglarized. She said she drew her gun, gave commands that Jean ignored, and then fired twice. But lots of people are raising questions about Geiger's story, which has shifted on some details. And according to an attorney for Jean's family, 2 people reported hearing knocking and a woman's voice saying, "Let me in," before the shooting. Geiger was arrested on manslaughter charges 3 days after she killed Jean and is now free on bail. But now Botham Jean's family wants to know why police seem to be treating him as if he were the culprit instead of the victim.
Because he black.
To have my son snared in such a way, I think shows that they're persons who are really nasty, who are really dirty, and are going to cover up for the devil, Amber Geiger. And I want to find out whether the toxicology reports on Amber has been released, because she was the murderer.
Joining me now is Esley Merritt, attorney for the family of Botham Jean, not Jean. Sorry, I apologize for my pronunciation. And so, Mr. Merritt, let's talk about this case. I think the thing that outraged people the most about the treatment of this young man after he was killed was the idea that his apartment was searched and the release of information of drugs being found in the apartment. Is that the normal course of business? And what is the family's comment on that?
It's not the normal course of business if you're investigating a non-police officer. If you're investigating a normal suspect and you believe they committed a crime as serious as murder, then the warrant you execute will produce evidence probative of that crime. The fact that the detectives saw the warrant, and that's very important, it's not just what they found in the home or alleged to found in the home. They saw the warrant looking for evidence of drug paraphernalia or other criminal activity. That's what they went to a judge and asked for. And that evidence would not be probative of the crime that they were investigating at all. They could only serve one purpose, which would be to smear the image of Botham Jean.
And I think let's clear up a couple of other things. Did Mr. Jean know Ms. Geiger?
There's no evidence we have that he knew Ms. Geiger. We've talked extensively with his friends, with his family, who he was very close to. We checked phone records and contact information. We don't believe the two know each other at all.
Was there, to your knowledge, ever a noise complaint or any other interaction between the two of them in terms of complaints from Ms. Geiger about Mr. Jean?
We haven't been able to confirm the noise complaints. There was a noise complaint to his home that day, but after speaking with the office managers, they weren't able to nail down where the noise complaint came from. It may have originated from administration versus a resident.
Is it true that Ms. Geiger lived directly below Mr. Jean?
She did live directly below him. That part is true.
And is the family aware of whether her apartment had a doormat? Because his apartment had a bright red, very distinctive doormat.
Her apartment complex her apartment door did not have a doormat. It certainly didn't have a red one, but there was no doormat there at all. There were other indicators such as the floor number being displayed on the wall and the hallways being distinctly different because each apartment complex generally had a doormat in front of it that would have distinguished her floor from his floor. We don't believe that she accidentally ended up in his apartment. His door wasn't coincidentally open on the day that she decided to accidentally walk into his apartment. We believe that much to be demonstratively false.
And the door being ajar or not ajar has been a tricky kind of thing to follow because it seems that Ms. Geiger's story may have changed from the door was locked and her key wouldn't work to the door was ajar. To your knowledge, are the doors in that apartment complex capable of being left ajar?
We know Esau is good at that.
Opened by something.
No, those are fire doors, and they slam shut. They have a sure slam on them. I've been in Mr. Jean's apartment. I've pulled it open slowly versus quickly. Those doors slam shut every time you hold them open. And in each version of her story, neither made sense. In the first version of the story, she was playing at the door. He swung it open and surprised him. The second version was really
you see him up there working on it, trying to bring him back.
Rangers, which says it was ajar, which it couldn't be. And then that she used the force of her key to swing the door open. But as I described, those doors swing shut. They slam shut. They don't swing open.
And the last question before I bring in the panel, to your knowledge, was Mr. Jean in the habit of leaving his apartment door unlocked?
No. Mr. Jean did not leave his door unlocked. He was a very meticulous accountant. He paid very close attention to detail, and his safety was a priority for him. He had a routine. He came into the door. He had a bowl right next to the door where he dropped his keys in. He wouldn't have been the type to leave it unlocked or ajar.
Would you mind, Mr. Mayor, just staying with us for a few minutes? I want to bring the panel in. Do you mind?
Please.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. I'm Tiffany Cross, managing editor at the BTC, still with me. And joining us now is MSNBC media analyst Eric Deggans and the police chief of Ferguson, Missouri, Delrish Moss. And Tiffany, I know you had a question for Mr. Merritt.
Yeah, Mr. Merritt, I've read that investigators have downloaded the electronic data from the door locks, and I'm wondering what, if anything, will that reveal, and when do we expect to get the results?
Sure, that's going to be very important information. They've captured not only Mr. Jean's door, but also Ms. Geiger's door below. Those leave, every time the key is used successfully, I have electronic key. Every time that it's used successfully, it leaves an electronic footprint. And so they should be able to know whether Amber Geiger accessed her apartment prior to accessing or entering Mr. Jean's apartment. They won't be able to tell if the door was left open, unfortunately, but if she in fact went to her apartment first, they will be able to capture that information.
I want to bring in Delrish Moss. And Delrish, thank you for being here. The police chief of Ferguson, Missouri, a longtime police officer, who worked in Miami, in the Miami area for a long time. So I know that you know of what you speak, sir. And so walk me through this. Is it normal after a police officer shoots someone, in general, not commenting on your particular police department specifically, but in general, is it normal for police to search the home of the decedent, of the deceased person, to look for drugs?
Well, I think in this case, the reason for the search of the decedent's home is because that's where the actual shooting took place. One of the things you're going to do is go in and look for fruit of whatever you think might have led up to the shooting. This is a homicide investigation, and so
led up to the shooting
on a homicide investigation, you will search the place where
Esau going to somebody's house killed.
Is it normal to share the results of that search with the media?
Well, typically what happens is that you file an information with the clerk's office basically saying these are the things that we found. And a lot of journalists, I know especially with the Miami Herald, they typically go to the clerk's office and they get that, which is public record. Now, actually going out and sharing it is not something that we normally do, but having it available where it's public record is the normal course of business.
And it does seem that Ms. Geiger, Delrish, has told a lot of different stories about, what happened that night. How quickly after a shooting are police officers typically required to file an actual official statement of what happened?
Well, one of the things that happens is this becomes a criminal investigation, and so just like the ordinary citizen, the police officer has the rights afforded by Miranda. So in some cases, if a police officer shoots and someone dies, they can't be forced to give a statement, because if they're forced to give that statement, then it's not admissible in court.
Let me go to Eric Deggans, because the other outrage this week, not only the fact that Mr. Jean's home was searched, that this information that drugs were found was released, that seemed to be a way of sort of making him look like he was some sort of suspect. He was in his own house, but the media's role in this, the fact that the Fox News affiliate tweeted that out, elicited a lot of reaction. What did you make of that this week, Eric?
Well, what's interesting to me about this, it does remind me a bit of what happened when Trayvon Martin was killed so many years ago in Florida, where I'm based. I have a book out called Race Baiter, where I talk about how race in media works. And so I took a hard look at how the Trayvon Martin case became a national media issue. And one of the things that happens is when you have a deadly event like this, where there are only two witnesses, the person who was killed and the person who killed them, there is this rush in the media to get any detail that people think may have some bearing on what happened, and a rush to report those details regardless of how it will impact the image of the victim or the image of the person who killed the person. And what we learned in Trayvon Martin is that it's there's this rush to sort of characterize who the victim is and try to see if that has some bearing on what happened in the situation, and often that can be unfair. If in the heat of the moment, obviously this officer may not know who this person is or what their background was or anything like that, but there is a rush to get these details and put them out in the public space because the public is hungry for details about what may have happened, the background of the officer, and the background of the person who was killed.
Yeah.
And I do think as media outlets we have to be more sensitive about what kind of details will come out and how they may affect how we see both the victim and the person who killed them.
Yeah, indeed. Let me play Dallas Mayor Mike Rawlings responding on Thursday to the release of information about Mr. Jean.
There are many in social media and new outlets that want to spread false innuendos. Bo was a great man, and I am disturbed today at those that try to besmirch his reputation. Shame on you. Stop it.
I think a lot of the emotion around the way that this was handled, Tiffany, is because this was a Fox outlet. It was a Fox News outlet.
Right, and that's very typical and very consistent with their playbook. And you talked a lot about this in the Trayvon Martin documentary that Eric was mentioning. And again, we see not only was Mr. Jean not accused of a crime, he wasn't arrested. He was just living in his home. And for people who constantly want to refute anything where you mention race, I would just ask that people question if this were a white woman in her apartment and an off-duty black police officer entered her home and shot her, would it matter that there was marijuana in the apartment? I don't think so. Or if this man had a gun on him and shot this woman, she's the interloper, she's the burglar, she's the intruder. Right. Would people run and be his champion? I just don't know. And so, actually I do know. But I would just ask people to ask themselves that question. This is something consistent. This happens to be a story that got headlines, thankfully. But there are many other nameless, faceless people who suffer these type of, not just fatal incidents, but just incidents that come with such indignity for black and brown people in this country every day. And people are emboldened to act as these, self-righteous law enforcement officers. Some people don't even carry a badge, and they don themselves these people. So it's just heartbreaking, and my heart goes out to his mother because I can't imagine what she's going through.
If I could